Okay, everyone, I think we are going to begin. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We're really excited to be here for the inaugural, the first ever MFA-P webinar. We're joined by three incredibly great advisors to talk about their experience incorporating charitable giving into their practice. And we're going to get deep into the weeds today with Serena Hack, Mark Halpern, and Michael Flux. You'll see all of the information as my dog barks in the background. Great timing, Oakley. Thank you. Isn't it? Don't we all love living in a human environment?
It adds to the charm, Brad. It adds to the charm. I can bring my dog into my office too if you want.
He's in my office precisely because it's the only place I can control him. Anyways, you've met my dog. Hopefully that's the last time we'll hear from him today.
Do you need a name though, Brad?
His name is Oakley. He's right here. We can introduce him a little later on. He's right beside me now.
Perfect.
Yeah, his timing is impeccable. He's old, so I can't get too mad at him. But we're gonna jump right into things, and I'm gonna ask each of our panelists today, starting with Serena, perhaps tell us a little bit about yourself and why philanthropy, why charitable giving is such an important part of your practice and your professional life. Serena, over to you, and then we'll turn things over directly to Mike and then to Mark.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Brad. And I couldn't be more thrilled to be part of the inaugural MFA-P panel. I don't know if we are ridiculous for agreeing to do it, but happy to be here in all the same realm. My name is Serena Hack, and I am the head of CI Asante Philanthropic Giving. And essentially, the reason for my sorry, I got really distracted by the dog, Brad. I'm going to start again. So I am the head of philanthropic advisory services here at CI Asante Wealth Management. When I think about my why, and I think about philanthropy is a vehicle for allowing people to really understand their values. And I think all of us, whether you're on the insurance side or wealth management side, or whatever side you really fall on when you're working as an advisor to your clients, helping them uncover their values and how to use their wealth in a way that will not only allow them financial clarity, but allow them the ability to see what else they can do with that wealth and the way that they can pass down their values and their legacy to the next generation or just their community, I think is a really privileged position to be in. And I can be more excited to have this conversation with you all today.
Great. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Brad. And I echo Serena's comments. Really appreciate you inviting us to participate today. Philanthropy is an important part of my personal life and my work life. And really, I guess, just to tell my story, I've been at Connor Clark and Lund now for 18 years as an executive vice president and portfolio manager. I work with high net worth investors, foundations, endowments. And obviously, there's a high correlation. The more money you have, the more tax problems you have, the more philanthropic you can be. And foundation clients are set up for that. So really, it's a part of my day job. And it became part of my personal life about 15 years ago when my boss tricked me into showing up for one meeting at St. Michael's Hospital. And the next day I was in the newspaper, and the next day after that I was joining up to be a volunteer. And at first I kind of begrudged the situation. I said, listen, I got a young kid at home in diapers. I got a house that's torn down to the ground. But I look back now and my boss has been one of my best friends and mentors. It's one of the things I'm most grateful for. He got me involved in philanthropy at a very young age, my early 30s. And I just got to see how great it feels to give, with your time and your money. And now I've kind of weaved that personal passion into a work passion where I can help clients to do the same. And so one of the goals of my practice is to work almost exclusively with clients that have charitable foundations of some sort or another, or causes that they support, or looking to have some kind of social impact, social purpose, help them to create legacies. It's just part of what I love to do. And so thanks for having me here today.
Great, Mark.
Thank you, Brad. And I echo the sentiments. It's really great to be here, and it's really great to help promote an amazing degree of MFA-P, which really helps to really professionalize what we're doing. I'm 30 years in professional practice. I say that my start was actually almost 50 years ago when my dad died of a heart attack when I was 11 and he was age 50 and really hadn't done any planning. So for us, it was very difficult sort of growing up, but we managed. But fast forward, now I work with very successful business owners and wealthy families, and we help them in 3 different areas. One is in estate planning, second is in tax minimization, using creative tax exempt insurance, and the third is in philanthropy. And really, it's a process that we'll explain, but it's a wonderful feeling because I grew up in a very philanthropic family, and it's part of our DNA to give back. But there are 2 ways to give. You can either write a check yourself, or you can get other people to write checks, and you can create a lot more money doing it that way. So it's a very valuable part of my world, and it's something we've evolved into because, they say that you should do what you love, and I'm very fortunate to be able to do something that I greatly love, and I think that passion comes through to clients to help inspire them and motivate them to do some special things around legacies.
Thanks so much to all of you. I promised everyone we would get deep in the weeds, and we're going to jump right in, and maybe starting right back with you, Mark. When you're talking to a prospective client, somebody who's perhaps not currently a client, about your practice, how do you convey to them how philanthropy fits into your approach?
So there are 2 types of people I meet. Some people who are coming to me specifically for philanthropy, but then most of them are not. As a matter of fact, most of them are not real philanthropists until we meet, which is really, we have to look at strategic philanthropy as part of the comprehensive holistic planning for all of our clients. No different than having a will and a power of attorney and insurance. Philanthropy has to be part of it. So how I introduce it with clients is 2 ways. One is I explain to everybody, all of us have 3 possible beneficiaries to our estate. You have family, you have charity, and you have the tax department. Each of us can only pick 2 of those. Which 2 would you pick? And 9 times out of 10, the client will say, I'll take family and charity. So I explain that with proper planning, there's ways to be remembered for leaving a lot of money for charity, as opposed to writing a big check to the tax department. Does that make sense? And they generally nod their head, and we'll just continue to talk about that. But we have some other ways to do it as well. I want to hear Michael and Serena as well, but we have some other ways to introduce it, which I can talk about later.
Sure. Perhaps, Mike, over to you.
Sure. Similar to Mark, I use some of the similar language. I've known Mark a long time. I think I've stolen some good lines from Mark. He might have stolen some lines from me, and so it's great to work with other collateral professionals that are focused on strategic philanthropy. We can all learn from each other. With me, it actually starts right with my bio, which is a page in my presentation, and when I introduce myself, when I talk about what I do. Of course, the key focus is investment management. We build pension caliber investment solutions for high net worth investors, foundations. We can also help them with ESG, SRI type investing where that's of interest, alternative investing, and that kind of rounds out the pension caliber solutions we give. But I tell them, outside of that, I'd really love to help clients with strategic philanthropy. I like to work with business owners, helping them with expansion, succession capital. So those are 2 key focus areas in my practice, and I'm very upfront about these being areas that I'd like to help people out with, even though that's not the key way that I make my living. And so that just strikes a certain kind of conversation with a client right out of the gate. Strategic philanthropy is a general term. Clients might ask a little bit about what that means, and then I can get into the whole story that I shared. My 15 years of volunteering in senior positions in United Way on the major individual cabinet, Sick Kids Professional Advisors Council, St. Michael's Hospital Foundation, President's Council, and other work that I've done there. And then clients like to share what they've done. And so as soon as you have that kind of intro, it's helping the client to like you because you're a good person that gives back in the community, and you can share stories. And if you align on a cause, say like sick kids or whatever it might be, or poverty around United Way or other poverty causes, you've got this instant connection. And then you can dive a little bit deeper into what strategic philanthropy means, which means maximizing. If you decide you want to give, if you decide you want to save in tax, how do you give most efficiently to maximize the social impact you can have?
Great. Serena, how do you talk to potential prospective clients?
Yeah, and maybe obviously echoing the same things that Mike and Mark are saying, but I also just wanted to give a little caveat. I'm actually not a through and through financial advisor. I'm actually someone who helps advisors CI Asante Wealth Management have the conversation. So all of the great things that Mark and Micah are saying, that's the goal of all advisors in Asante, to be able to talk about it so fluently. The real key thing for me is making sure that people understand when they walk in the door, tax saving products that you can use, all of these things are great, but it's really about, when Mike said, it's in my bio, it's ingrained in who I am. It's really being vulnerable enough to tell your story at the beginning, to tell your story and it not only goes into strategic philanthropy, but I believe that, to have really full relationships with your clients, it'll weave into everything else as well. It'll be that protective mode, as my business partner and mentor Keith Thompson always says, around those clients, because you're starting to align on a value-based proposition rather than a product-based proposition. So one of the things that we really try to help people kind of uncover, what's the individual advisor's story to philanthropy, and how can you communicate that? The other big thing is that there are key questions that clients need answered before they can start to think about philanthropy. Philanthropy is a bucket like anything that should be continuously brought up through all of your wealth planning meetings. But you need to make sure that when you're answering the questions like, do I have enough? Are my kids taken care of? What do I want this to mean? Because now you have the wealth. And as we can see now, as wealth is accumulated with a certain element of our population, assets are being given much more frequently than cash. So how do we use our tools that we have in our toolbox to allow us to be able to actualize those conversations in a meaningful way?
Great, thanks. I'm just going to remind everybody, I've made a comment in the chat, but please do use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to pose questions of the panelists. We will come to those at the end. We're planning on some time for having some Q&A from all of you, so please do use that function. Okay, so you have a prospective client, you've kind of introduced yourself, but now let's say the clients are now your clients, and you're sitting down with them in your office or your virtual office to have their first meeting. How do you talk about philanthropy at that point? What do you actually say to your clients when you are having your first meeting with them? Mike, we'll start with you.
Sure. This isn't always in the first meeting, but investment planning is part of the value that we add. Clients want to know, am I going to be okay? And of course, when you're in the high net worth realm, it comes down to things like how much you're going to spend. The $1 million question is how much is enough? Well, that's a different answer for every client. So we do investment planning or asset forecasting analysis to help clients understand that they're going to be okay. And the great majority of our clients are going to be completely fine, but they don't really understand that until we walk through the process. And Serena touched on this as well, but we have one great chart that we end up showing, which is here's your core capital. This is what you actually need to meet all your personal financial objectives. And then here's how much is your excess capital. And with that, you can buy insurance, you can spend it, you can buy houses, cars, take vacations, you can give it to your kids, or you can consider philanthropy. You're in the enviable position where you can leave a legacy. You can tie your children into that legacy, helping to create great global citizens. And think about what you want to do with this excess capital. The fact of the matter is you could spend it today and you'll be fine, or you can give it today, tomorrow, and forever and always, and leave a lasting legacy. And so, this kind of investment planning process really helps us to uncover these opportunities for clients. Once you make them feel comfortable that, I guess I use the line that charity always starts at home. Everybody wants to make sure that they're going to be okay, that their kids, their family's going to be okay. But beyond that, what's the mark that you want to leave on the world? And so, this is now becoming part of every client conversation. Whereas before I was maybe a little bit more reactive since taking the MFA-P program and becoming an MFA-P, which I'm proud of. I'd say if we did it in almost every client conversation, and it's just interesting to see how that evolves. Some clients, won't bite out of the gate, but they seem to become more receptive over time. And it's just, what do you want to do with this excess capital? What do you want to be known for?
Mike, can I just jump in on that? Because I think that's a really important point. So one of the things you just touched on, which I think is great, is that everyone thinks a lot of the times advisors will think that the philanthropic conversation is a one-time conversation. But by you allowing those little conversations to happen when there is a strategic movement of capital or something like that, people have now become comfortable enough that they have enough, that they've taken care of what they need to take care of. And now their wealth can do things that they never experienced before. So I thought that was a great point, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Rena.
Yeah, and I was going to touch on that. First of all, I would just say ditto what Mike said, which is so true. But I think that the challenge is that people have done investing, but very few people have done planning. And this really comes down to the planning perspective, where they've gathered or accumulated a lot of assets, and most of our clients realize they've passed that point in their life that unless they were to blow all their money on a penny stock or start spending frivolously, chances are they're going to have more money when they die than what they have today. And that means that they're the custodian or trustee for the next generation. What they don't realize is that they're partnering with the tax department on that money. So once we identify that all of the assumptions, they're never going to run out of money, they've got all the money, they can buy the houses and the recreational properties and all of that. Now they see that they've got a whole bunch of never spend money. We can then use that never spend money to either preserve their estate for family or for charity. And I think that's really the key, because we meet with a lot of people who've become very successful, but they haven't become significant yet. And people want to tap into that much more so during COVID than ever before, where people are much more aware of their mortality. There's never been a better time to have this conversation. And if they're already giving to charity, what we've recognized is most people in Canada give by giving cash, credit cards, and checks. And that is the most inefficient way of giving charity in Canada. We've recognized over 20 other ways that are more cost and tax efficient that they could be introduced to. And in our area, where we specialize in tax exempt insurance strategies, we've identified over 15 ways to create transformational charity, often by converting taxes into charity. So if somebody's passionate about something, that's great. But now if we can take the tax aspect in it, we can just elevate that to a much higher level. So again, that's just part of the conversation that we're having with clients and prospects.
I love that phrase, Mark. Turning taxes into charity is just, do people want CRA to be their number one charity? Because that's forced upon all of us, but we have a choice there, right?
Right. So you also
If
said
I can
something
just,
that,
sorry,
go ahead, Serena.
I would just also say that to that, taxes are really important, and I really want to stress that. But there is also the idea that I was just on this great panel yesterday with Joanne Ryan and Neil Goldclay and Juniper Green, and it was a whole understanding of how women are moving money and how next generation is moving. So it's understanding how to talk about taxes, but not talk about it in a way as taking from the government, but actually allowing you to have a bigger impact. So that's a really big point that I think is important to make at this point.
I think you're right, Serena. We live in a great country. At the same time, all of the things that we're discussing are all endorsed by the Tax Act and the CRA. And they know that they cannot at all fund social capital in this country. So they're making it much easier for us to participate and take that responsibility off of their hands. So I think that people, yes, we need roads and bridges and universities and hospitals, but there's just so much. And we'd really like to allocate that to other causes that perhaps our clients are passionate about.
Yeah, that's great.
How do you take a client from success to significance? Because you're sometimes just by virtue of the fact that they're working with you, they're already successful by most standards. Like, how do you transition that mindset? Like, what do you say to your clients to help them understand that or do they do it on their own and they ask you? I'm very interested, because that's kind of seems like a major cultural transition for an individual to move from thinking about their own success to thinking about their own legacy.
Well, when we've talked about it before, I've actually had some clients cry, okay, in 30 years, where they realize they haven't done enough. They haven't really created any social capital. But we ask the question straight up: are there charities that are important to you and your family? And then as an advisor, we know the first person who speaks loses. So at that point, you have to zip up your lips and just have your clients and your prospects talk about what's important to them. Oh, why is that important? You find out that somebody had, God forbid, a sickness, and they were at Sick Kids Hospital or St. Mike's, or, they helped this poor person and they went through immigration services. And so, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could do something to give back to that organization? And we could do it by just finding money that you're not spending, or just finding ways to create something that would be very, very transformational, that could pass along a legacy for your kids. And by the way, most of the time when I speak to people, we don't talk about their children. we talk about their grandchildren. Their kids are already spoiled enough. No, I'm just kidding. The kids, they want to make sure, some want to give everything to their kids. Some want to give enough to keep them still, you know, employed in the world, but it's really about the grandchildren, passing that legacy along to the grandchildren. And once you start speaking about that, people will just start volunteering lots of information.
Right. Mike, Serena, any thoughts on that transition from success to significance, and how you address that issue with your clients?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess, you know, I've kind of covered this before, but the fact that I'm so involved in philanthropy, and it's part of my introduction, part of my whole client conversation, that just naturally leads to, you know, there's almost never been a time where a client hasn't said, "So great that you've been giving for that amount of time to these great causes, healthcare, poverty, education, all very important things." And then you know, they will often just volunteer what their areas of interest are, and if not, I'll just ask the open-ended question and ask them to speak. And once they share and they talk about that, I can say, you know, is this part of how you would like to leave an impact? You know, are you looking to leave a legacy like this? And most of the time, the answer is yes. You know, if we've already talked about charity back and forth, the answer is going to be yes. And then it's like, well, one of the ways I love to help clients beyond what my day job is to help people to establish that legacy, right? Help them set up a family foundation. It's a lot easier than you think. You can establish a donor advised fund for as little as $10,000 in some cases. So let me just talk to you about how easy that is.
$5,000 and even less in other cases.
Yeah.
If you're under 45, some of these organizations actually allow you to have a foundation for $5,000.
And
Right.
most people still think you need, you know, $5 million or more to have a family foundation. You need to be the rich and the famous, the people with the names on the walls of the hospitals and the schools. Not the case, right? So you start with that, and you can say, listen, I've had a foundation since my mid-30s, and I started it with a pretty small amount, and I've worked diligently to build that up to something that's more meaningful to me and my family. I've involved my kids. You know, they become good global citizens. They're involved in the process, and you know, I don't have grandkids yet, Mark, but you know, it's part of the plan, right? And
Get some gray hair first, Mike.
yeah,
Okay.
it's you know, the beautiful thing about Zoom is I've been able to dye all the imperfections out, and you know, good lighting and whatever else. But you know, it's a natural. You know, there's no scripted thing that I use. It just, you know, we have conversational discussions with clients. I think all of us work in that regard, and it just naturally becomes a part of every conversation.
You know, just to attach on that, one of the things Michael brought up, which I'm sure you do as well, is if your clients are not going ahead and volunteering this information, you have lots of case studies and examples of people who are just like them. If they're single, with a divorced, you know, wealthy family, you know, just to tell them over a case study of somebody who sold their business or sold some real estate and told them about what happened, not what you did, but what happened at the end, that gets them thinking, really, you know, and now that allows you to have a further conversation. I find the talking stories, we're in a language business, a words business, and stories are really things that people remember much more than, you know, the technical stuff that we're showing them.
Right.
Yeah, Mark, that's a really good point. You know, Fraser Green and I just did a great storytelling workshop last week at the CHEP Toronto chapter. And the whole thing is that if you don't have stories, talk to one of the MFA-P people. They have stories and they're happy to share these stories because there's plenty of philanthropy to go around. And the more that we're having these conversations, the more that we'll be able to push it down the line. But I do want to take it back a little bit because sometimes advisors come to me and they say, okay, Serena, so I'm new into the philanthropy game myself. I haven't really been able to explore it. You know, Serena, have my own foundation and I'm in my 30s. Not a lot of people have experienced that, Mike, like we have had the ability to, and then grow it into something that we wanted to. So how do you have those conversations? And I want to bring it back to something that Mark said earlier. You know, the reason why he does what he does is because of his own personal experience with his father, right? So, you know, just taking it back and asking, you know, what were your earliest memories of giving in your family? And sometimes taking the word philanthropy out of it makes it more accessible. So I think about finding those elements of language and taking out the actual vehicle or, you know, whether there's a tax event or not, and just asking, how do you remember giving and how would you like to be remembered for your giving is a really great way of doing that. And then Mark's classic example is just sit and shut up and let them talk.
Yeah, I think all good points. I'm moderating the panel, and I'm not an advisor, nor have I ever really been an advisor working directly with clients. But the one thing I've learned in 20 years of working with advisors directly, and this is a really important point, I think, for all advisors on the line today, and even people working in the charitable sector as well, is a conversation about philanthropy typically doesn't come up on its own. You have to initiate it. It's a
Mhm.
really, really important point. A lot of advisors may dance around it, but you actually have to ask these pointed questions about legacy and values or taxes to be able to initiate the conversation. And that's really important, that if you're just kind of waiting for it to come along, it's not going to. You have to actually take the steps to be proactive about it. That's all I'm going to say.
And I hear about lawyer. I mean, again, nothing to knock lawyers, but you'll ask lawyers, do we talk about philanthropy? And they say yes. They always ask the question, would you like to leave a gift in your will? And that's the extent of it. I mean, there's a lot more than just asking that. So I really feel that there, you can either become a specialist in this area, or the idea is you should really collaborate with other people who are specialists. As Serena said, there's so much business and opportunity for all of us in this wonderful sector. But it's really good to have a bench of people that you can bring in as a resource to help you in those situations where maybe you don't have as much experience.
Speaking of storytelling, are there any stories that you would like to share, that maybe an example of a story, leaving out the gory details of that you would typically bring up with your clients to kind of initiate the conversation? Any of you?
I've got a few. I mean,
Well, share one.
So very recently, I was introduced to an 80-year-old widow who had about a $10 million net worth, made up of, she was very big into investments in non-registered and equity. She was very good at it. And we met and we looked at the planning. I said, wow, you've done very well. I said, but you're not worth $10 million. And she was very aghast. I mean, you don't like 80-year-old ladies saying bad words, but I said, you're only worth $6.5 million. And she was not aware of the fact that, there was $1 million of capital gains on her non-registered portfolio. She had a RIF of over $4 million. 54% of that was going to the government. So that would be an example where you got somebody's attention because they're not even aware of that. So that would be one example. Other examples that we've had are just people who have had, let's say, old insurance policies that they've had for many years, that maybe they took it out when they were younger and they had a mortgage and kids, education, etc. And that policy would likely not move the dial on their estate planning anymore. And they're not aware of the fact that they could be generous by donating that policy to a charity, getting a fair market value receipt for that policy from an independent actuary, and be recognized for giving a big gift, and getting a tax benefit as well. And going forward, of course, the premiums that they pay are considered charitable donations as well. There's millions, I would probably guess billions of dollars of those opportunities out there. And again, if you don't have that conversation or tell them about it, they just don't know.
That's funny, Mark, because I got two scenarios that are exactly the same as that. I wonder if it's the same person.
Any stories
and
from you,
beyond
Mike
that,
or Serena?
pardon me?
Any stories that you would share that you would
Yeah, so
typically
actually,
bring up
I've got those two exact same stories that Mark has. Genuinely, different scenarios, maybe different situations, but insurance is a big one. Once people are financially independently wealthy, they realize that they don't necessarily need their insurance policy for themselves. So instead of that going to their kids, they've passed along enough wealth during their lifetime. Upon their death, the policy can be, you can make a charity the beneficiary, and there's ways that you can actually pass along the policy now and get immediate tax benefit today when you need it and get that impact. But the other big one that's obvious, big real estate sales, business sales, and the business sales for me are a big common story because these have been A-type people that have built a successful business. Now they've got the biggest tax event of their lives, and they're just a little bit disgruntled about that. They want to deal with things, and so it's very easy to bring up philanthropic giving as one of the tools to deal with that. But the other component is, what are these people going to do with their time? They've sold their business. Maybe there's a couple of years where they're going to ask to be involved, but then they're going to be retired, the big R word. And I often ask, what are you going to do with your time? Are you going to start another business? Oh, no. Well, do you want to get involved in charity? I've been involved for 15 years in all these different organizations at senior levels. Is that of interest to you? And then it just kind of weaves this whole conversation together, right? You can help them deal with their tax problem, with their the social legacy they want to leave, the social impact they want to have, and how they want to spend their time, which often doesn't just require your time; it requires your time and dollars. Why not just fuel your family foundation today, deal with your tax problem, and then you can give for the rest of your life because you got the money in this family foundation, and you can tie your family into it, your spouse, your kids, your grandkids. That's an all too common story and situation.
Right.
Yeah, and if I can take it maybe in a little bit of a different direction, but on the same theme, I think if, as we've talked about, if you're slowly having these conversations of philanthropy and you get to either a big tax event, or I think about one specific example from one of our clients, from all of these discovery questions, we realized that she had a deep understanding and deep want to learn more about the city of Toronto and the impact on women in the city of Toronto specifically. We as financial advisors are very good at connecting, and we're very good at making sure that there's appropriate resources for our clients to get them where they want to go. We in that moment realized that we probably weren't the best resource for her to be able to, one, connect with other women-led organizations, other women like herself in the community, because we know that women like to give together and like to understand their community. So we actually worked with a local community foundation that had a specific women-focused a specifically focused women's initiative. But the really cool thing about that is that because we had this perspective, the community foundation actually asked to interview us. So we got to sit with that client and have her interviewed about, her whole identity in philanthropy, going back to when she was a little girl and her father. Those types of moments are invaluable. We even had it framed, a great picture of the three of us. And it was one of the most, moments that I hold dear. So whether it be, real gifts in the moment, whether it be insurance and things that we can tactically do within our own company, or if we have to ask for help from other organizations to get people across the finish line, it's all good. Like there's so much out there.
Right. Are there clients with whom you're more inclined to have a philanthropic discussion?
Mike, do you want to go?
Yeah. So, one thing I was really reluctant to do early on in my personal philanthropy is invite clients to events that are tied to causes that I'm supporting. And then one year I just had an epiphany where I said, why not just invite a bunch of people? And it went whatever so well when you invited them to something that's healthcare related, where they can learn. This is not a Connor Clark and Lund private capital commercial now, where I'm talking about investments and trying to, get them happy from an investment standpoint. But I was trying to educate them about healthcare, right? And invite them to some interesting events where, quite frankly, these charities put these events on, and they're not asking you to write a check when you arrive. It's free client service, right? And you're connecting. Any client that accepts your invitation is basically saying, yes, I'm interested in this. And so for those people, the conversation started there maybe, but then it's continued to evolve, because now I know they've got strong interest in healthcare or poverty or whatever cause I've invited them to. And I think that's a great way to kind of tie your business with your personal interests again, because you want to appreciate your clients, and you make the invitation. You get a thank you for that, and if they attend, you get a big time thank you for it, and it connects you on a personal level. And for me, those are the most rewarding relationships, where we have things in common. And my clients that care about giving back and philanthropy and social impact, social purpose, are some of my nicest clients. It's not always 100% that big philanthropists are nice people, but I do feel that for me, in my practice, the ones I enjoy working with the most are the ones that like to give back as well.
Beautiful.
Mark or Serena?
Mark, do you have one that you wanted to share?
I just, in terms of, again, the question, Brad, was
The question was, are there clients with whom you're more inclined to have a discussion about
yeah,
giving?
definitely people who care. I mean, there are two types of people out there. There are people who care, and there are people who don't care. The people who care, we love to work with. The people who don't care, there's not a lot of time that or things that we can help them with. But I would suggest that the people that have the greatest opportunity, and this is something really for the people who are listening, we've sort of brought it down to about 5 different types of people that we love to work with. One are singles, widows, and divorcees, who are one incident away without having a tax-free rollover to a spouse from a huge tax bill. Most of them have large RSPs or RIFs that 54% is going to the government. They don't even know about that. So that's number one. Second type was somebody who has sold a business or will be selling a business or is selling real estate or has sold real estate. As Mike said, biggest tax year, biggest year that they can get rid of that tax completely through charity and use insurance to repatriate that donation back to their family as well. The third people are somebody who's done an estate freeze. So an older person who's got private company shares that have tax liabilities on those. If they're philanthropic, we can show them a great way to reduce taxes and create a lot of charity. And then the last other two that I wanted to just suggest is anybody who's paying taxes, and let's face it, in Canada, we pay taxes, but if they've got a non-registered portfolio of investments, and this is really Mike's world, if they're going to have taxes due in April, why not take some of that non-registered, equities that have this big capital gains tax that doesn't belong to them, it belongs to the government, and set up a donor advised fund to offset 75% of their income tax and carry forward the balance for another 5 years. So you get that's really simple stuff. And then the last thing is really the nonprofits out there. Unfortunately, the charities are so busy collecting money to keep the lights on, and maybe every 3 to 5 years coming up with sort of like a capital campaign to catch up or for a special project. But this whole area of legacy plan giving is still so below the radar, and they need our help more than anybody because they don't necessarily have the resources or the expertise at the organization to help those people, speak to the major donors to create those big gifts. So those are the people that I kind of like to work with, Brad.
Great.
Oh, sorry, if I can just add to that too.
Please.
I think, Mark, you brought up a great point there as well. Brad, and the idea that are there some people that you just don't bring it up with? I think that there's different ways to approach the subject, right? It might not be relevant the first time that you have it because they don't believe in the charitable sector, whatever the objection is. But when you get to a point by saying, okay, well, 54% of your RIF is now going to go to the CRA. How do you feel about that? That could possibly push someone across the
they suddenly get more charitable at that point. It's very true.
Right. Or a donor advised fund is a great, if their kids are someone that they want to pass their values on to, we have clients that have used a donor advised fund in their family meeting process that like every year around the holiday season in December, they'll have those conversations with their kids. And that's another way of bringing up the subject of philanthropy instead of focusing on a value or a cause, bringing it back to an item that they actually have voiced some, passion for.
Very good
And
points.
you guys just triggered a thought, every year around tax planning, Mark made the comment, it makes sense. If you want to manage your tax situation a little bit every year, reduce the tax burden a little bit, just give a little bit every year, give securities that are appreciated. And for me, every new client that I bring in, they've got an existing situation. If they've been invested for the last 12 years, they've got some enormous pregnant gains, right? And so, you can't just say, rip the Band-Aid off, sell everything and give it to us and we'll take care of it. I mean, you want to be really mindful of the tax. And so, if you got these big pregnant gains in the portfolio, I mean, just a simple scenario. Let's say you bought some Apple at $50,000. Now it's $200,000. It's gone up 4 times. Just the last 12 to 15 months alone, it's gone up significantly in that time frame. You can sell that $200,000 and you're left with 160, and 40,000 will go to the government, which is still fine. You've done really well on that $50,000 investment. Or for $15,000 less, you could have a $55,000 family foundation and keep 145,000 for yourself, versus the 160. You got 15,000 less for you, but you got 55 that you can give to charity this year, next year, every year for the rest of your life. No tax going to CRA. Right. And so this kind of modeling is just part of what we do as part of our practice, but clients just don't naturally assume that that's a possible outcome for them. So you need to show them the math, show it right on the calculator how it works.
And the math isn't complicated, right? I mean, the math is fairly straightforward. And I always say, well, if you don't understand the tax implications of charitable giving, understand the more you give to charity, the less that you give to CRA. And that, when people are making a dollar, they're going to save around half of that dollar, depending on the province in which they reside. And most of us can understand that concept of saving 50 cents on the dollar. I want to talk a little bit about the why, because I think we jumped into the conversation assuming that incorporating charitable giving and philanthropy into your practice is a good thing. And of course, I think all of us agree, and hopefully everybody on the call agrees or will come to agree with that. But maybe talk a little bit about the impact that philanthropy has had on your client relationships and even your retention of those clients, and maybe give an example of how it's changed your relationship with a client, either one client or a number of clients.
Okay, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
So I think from my perspective, because I'm not an advisor who works with clients on a daily basis, and I gave that great example of one of our clients that I work with, Keith Thompson, and the Community Foundation. But one of the other things that I think is really important from my perspective is the idea that we are able to, the way that Michael just talked about the dollars of it, right? Like that is an idea of philanthropy that not everyone has access to. So when I think about the idea of why and how do we make sure that philanthropy is moving forward, the idea of us as vehicles to understand our clients' values and put it forth, I think is a really important idea.
Great. Mike
Yeah,
or Mark?
I would say, listen, I mean, if you can align with a client on something that you're both passionate about, it's going to make for a stronger relationship. It's going to be a stickier relationship, one that each of you are going to enjoy more. And when you commit to setting up a family foundation and you're the advisor on the other side of the table that's helped them to establish that, they're going to enjoy and appreciate it. And it's going to be pretty hard for them to deny that you've helped them to establish that. Nobody else has given them that advice before. They didn't know it even existed. And it's not rocket science, but you're presenting a new concept, a new idea, and then you add in giving securities in kind, structured flow through gifts, all the things that we learn about in the MFA-P. These are not rocket science things, but most clients, the great majority, 90+%, don't realize that you can do these things. So if you're the one that's establishing that for them, it's going to make for a sticky relationship. And just having a foundation itself, like unless you're just going to flow it in, and you're not going to set up a foundation if it's all going to flow at 1 year. Most people set these foundations up because they only want to give 3.5% to 5% a year, so they can maintain this foundation for their lifetime and their kids' lifetimes and their grandkids' lifetimes, and really have this be something that will be around through the generations. That's how I've done it for myself. And so through the generations, that's long-term sticky money.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to find somebody to replace me to take care of these people and grandkids at some point, right?
I think one of the things what we brought up is, I think, there's this old adage, you have to have skin in the game in order to, you can only sell what you own. So everybody who's on this call, everyone should have a donor advised fund set up. There's no excuse not to. Once you have it and you just get so excited about how it works, you'll be more passionate about talking to other people about it. I find that philanthropy is a wonderful area because it's not product driven. It's really about values. And that makes the conversation so much easier and more fluid and closer. It really makes, they're sticky, and it makes you also a lot more referable. And it's also one of the things that I find is great. It's the door opener. If you are talking about philanthropy, now that client probably is going to open up about all their other things, which means that it's a great opportunity for you then to do more comprehensive tax and estate planning, leading to larger, opportunities for you and for them and the charities as well. But sometimes most of the time, the client does appreciate, what you've done. They really do. I had I'm the chair of the professional advisory committee for the Jewish Foundation of Greater Toronto, and they have an annual event called the Book of Life, where they recognize about 24 people in the community who have stepped up. And again, they were not Warren Buffett or Bill Gates types, but they recognized the last time we did this pre-COVID, there were 24, and 6 of those people were my clients. And that was a great feeling. And I can just tell you that there's not a chance in France that any of them would have been recognized in this Book of Life if we'd not shown them how easy it was to move assets around and convert money into taxes into charity, and how wonderful it is to create an enduring legacy for the family. So, I think the conversation is just having the conversation. That's all we have to do.
Yeah, Mark, you just sparked something in me as well. The idea, we have an advisor out in British Columbia, and you're talking about clients that have been able to allocate their gift accordingly, or put it in a donor advised fund, or give it in real time to a charity. But there are people out there who've never really thought about giving, and because he had systematic conversations about philanthropy, the clients finally got to a point where they were saying, no, we'll talk about it next meeting. We'll talk about it next meeting. And finally, once they had taken care of all of the financial clarity that needed to happen, they looked at the advisor and said, we don't know where to start. We don't know where to go to, who to go to. We don't know what causes we care about as a team, for our marriage and for our children. And he gave them a task. He's like, we have another 4 months until we meet again. And, pick 3 organizations in your local community that you're interested by. So then they sent them just before the next meeting. He and his partner did a bunch of research on those organizations. They talked about it. And then at the next meeting, they actually invited one of the charity representatives to come in and chat about that organization. So there are opportunities, whether that be through organizations that you are a part of personally, or allowing people to guide them through the process of allocating to a specific charity. It can be quite fulfilling in both realms.
Great. Thanks for that, Serena. We're going to open up the floor for questions, and before I do, I'll just remind you, you can enter your question into the queue by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and typing in your question. What we didn't do at the beginning of the call, which I'll do now, is just talk a little bit about the MFA-P designation just for a moment. The MFA-P designation, and MFA-P stands for Master Financial Advisor in Philanthropy, is actually the first professional designation for advisors in philanthropy in Canadian history. It's about 1.5 years old. So if you're an advisor, and obviously we're scratching the surface today, but if you really are serious about incorporating philanthropy into your practice, it's a wonderful designation for you to take. It's not too onerous. There will be a promotion during the month of June. You'll hear about that through emails that you'll receive after the call today. The code will be MFA-P June, but it will be the largest discount that we'll have in the 2021 calendar year. So it's a great designation. The other question is, a lot of people in the charitable sector do ask me, who are working in charities, ask and say, should I get the MFA-P designation? Is it for me? The MFA-P designation was definitely designed for advisors. People in the charitable sector can get the designation, but keep in mind that the content was designed for advisors. You will learn a lot about how advisors incorporate philanthropy into their practice with their clients, but it is from the advisor perspective. Again, open to people working in the charitable sector, but there are obviously some other wonderful educational opportunities for you, most notably through CAGP, the Canadian Association of Gift Planners. The first question from the audience, given the fact that the 3 of you are advanced philanthropic planners, could you share how you have, through planning, changed the way and where your clients give to be perhaps more efficient and effective? What's the difference between facilitating generosity and planning gifts?
Oh,
Go ahead, Serena.
I was just going to say simply, we had a lot of clients giving one-time cash gifts with no real strategy about what they were trying to achieve. And so what we really tried to do with a lot of these, because you would see the money, right? You'd see it on their tax return. You would see money moving through, sometimes not so significant. And then sometimes when they are significant, you kind of hold your breath and you're like, where was I in that decision? Because there were probably more efficient ways of giving. But what you can actually see through all of this is the idea that there is an opportunity to have a conversation. And what we've done is actually made the use of donor advised funds a lot more accessible and a lot more digestible to our clients. So talking about it in client and donor friendly language. Those of you who know me from my CAGP role, I really try to emphasize that donors are clients and clients are donors. So sometimes they can come, a donor can be talking to a charity professional thinking that they're going to come in and they're going to give a one-time grand gift. I see Mike smiling, that probably happens all the time, but then when you go back to your financial advisor and you look at your planning, you kind of see the opportunity to either give through a donor advised fund, give through insurance, give through appreciated securities. Now, especially as we have an aging population, we're seeing more move that way. So when I actually look at ways that we've been able to help, it's acknowledging these one-time gifts as great acts of generosity, but then actually taking it and strategically applying it to allow for whatever vehicle is appropriate to provide the opportunity for strategic philanthropy.
Yeah, I think that's great, Serena. I mean, I think, in the investment world, we always talk about investing is for the long term, right? And financial planning is about the long term. You're talking about a 20, 35-year time horizon, depending on the age of the clients, or longer in some cases. And so, I mean, why would you just want to, give today to save tax and just have a one-time benefit when you can have a social impact return today, tomorrow, and forever, and through the generations, right? So, donor advised funds is a big part of what I'll coach people on, because once you got that established, you got money in there. It's fun to watch that build every year, and so it becomes an every year discussion, or like an every time you meet the client discussion. What are we going to do this year to save a little bit on tax, get some more into your foundation, leave a greater legacy? So I just wanted to make that comment. Another thing is, you talked about the MFA-P, and you're right. It wasn't, for us, we've been already working the space. It wasn't a super difficult program for us, but I would say it's really, as it's a great door opener. Just when you have the conversation, MFA-P, what does that mean? Well, Master Financial Advisor Philanthropy. It's a commitment that I've made to strategic philanthropy, and it's an area of interest in my personal life and my business life, and so that's part of every story. And I almost find this designation differentiates me more than the CFA, believe it or not, because there's so many of us that have the CFA in the investment world. And CFA, MBA, I've had that for ages, but the MFA-P somehow is differentiating me more versus my peers than the CFA, which was a 3-year pretty tough grind to get. And for many people, it's taken 5 or 6 years to get. But the MFA-P has really differentiated me, and it's a great door opener conversation.
Yeah, thanks.
I think Mike and Serena both answered for me. So hopefully that answers the questions. They both great.
The question came in a couple times about the time commitment and how long it generally takes, and it does differ from person to person. Whether you have a lot of background in this area, but I'd say I usually say it's about 30 to 50 hours of time. It might be less or more. And some people do it in a matter of a couple of months. Some people have strung it out a lot longer. But it's certainly not as onerous as say the CFA designation. Another question. We're coming up to the top of the hour, but it's an interesting question. How do you help donors find meaning in their gifts, and how do you help them enjoy the impact and celebrate the impact of what they're doing, and maybe even participate in the impact?
Good question. If they're giving to a cause that I'm connected with in some way, shape, or form, and this is not, I think you've got to really separate this and not cross the line and avoid conflicts of interest. We all have our causes that we're looking to raise money for, but the easy way to kind of have commonality around that is to invite them into events. Like I've said, if there's an interesting event, like St. Michael's Hospital does the Angels Den. So venture capital type investors, angel investors are going to find that interesting. It's like a dragon's den for medical innovation. And, I found clients have really just been intrigued by that. And maybe that leads to a gift that they give to St. Michael's Hospital. And now we've got this common connection. And where you're connected to the charity, you can certainly open up lots of ways to celebrate that donation in a very fair, positive fashion, and have that connectivity. And otherwise, I'd say just in general, if you've helped them establish a foundation, when you're allowed to have dinners again, outside of the COVID world, make that a special client appreciation night. We want to congratulate them for establishing the foundation and celebrate that as a milestone, and a big step forward in them having and leaving a personal legacy. So, sometimes I try to tie client appreciation, client entertainment with some of the work that we've done to get them established into strategic philanthropy and celebrate it that way.
I was going to just suggest that, yes, if the client has an interest, either in something that I'm involved with, or most of the time it's something they're involved with, then just introducing them to that organization. We certainly know the heads of them. They've got a lot of experience in terms of cultivating some sort of bespoke way of recognizing that person and doing something that's special for the family. I also feel that one of the most hidden treasures that we have are our community foundations, the Toronto Foundation, the Oakville Foundations. You've got to reach out to those foundations. They've got so much wonderful wisdom and knowledge to help you, to help your clients. And I'm always referring my clients to those organizations. And then finally, there are some very good consultants out there who maybe work more in the high net worth, who help families create their bespoke philanthropic footprints. So they might not be clear. I'm not an expert in that. I'm more of the expert in creating that charity or maximizing that charity. And to partner with some of those people, they're fantastic. And if anybody needs any referrals for those people, there's a wonderful list on one hand of great people that you could work with.
And along those lines too, like if a client sets up a foundation and you find out here's the 3 causes that matter to them, if there's one of those 3 causes that really resonates with you too, help them to celebrate establishing this foundation by making a gift to that organization in their good name, right? And you still get the tax receipt, but you're doing it in recognition of them establishing this foundation. And I like to support my clients and I like to support philanthropy. So, if you help them to establish this, you are benefiting from this as well from a business relationship standpoint. So why not give back a little bit of some of the personal business benefit that you've recognized for yourself?
Mike, we've done that so many times. It's a great idea. Just invest in the causes that your clients are passionate about. And you get again, $2 donation, $1 tax saving. It's wonderful. And you're really making an important statement to them that you're really partners in this.
Yeah, and walk the walk is what we say. Oh, sorry, walk the talk. We always say, right? That's really important. And I think maybe this is a little bit off the wall, but just ask them how they want to be recognized. Like having that conversation is we have clients that don't want to be recognized and they want to do it with some anonymous footprint. Mm-hmm. But the idea of understanding that you could ask them how they want their values instead of, it might not be their name, but how do you want your values recognized through this gift? How do you want it to happen year over year? A lot of the things that are happening now, and I know that this is probably a whole subject in itself, but like the old versus new philanthropy and, intergenerational wealth transfer is happening. And there's a whole element of younger philanthropists that are out there that don't necessarily want to do it in the way that it's been done in the past. So how do you have that evolving conversation and that evolving recognition? And maybe it's not just through a charitable organization, but maybe it's in the recognition of the next generation, right? Maybe it's in the recognition of saying to Mark, saying to your client, I know this great value, this great person can really align your values that you want your legacy to be and help you have that conversation with your next of kin. Those are ways of honoring the relationship and honoring the philanthropic giving and taking it to the next level.
Yeah, well said. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour. So first of all, I'd really like to thank our 3 panelists, Mike Flex, Mark Halpern, and Serena Hack. Tremendous wisdom. You're incredible leaders in the space, and as MFA-P graduates, really wanted to thank you for sharing your wisdom and really highlighting the importance of the designation and what it can bring to your practice. Would like to thank our 3 MFA-P partners, Knowledge Bureau, CAGP, the Canadian Association of Gift Planners, Inspire Philanthropy. We're incredibly excited about the MFA-P and what it can do to change the philanthropic landscape in Canada. Thanks to all of you for joining the call today. Hopefully we know this is going to be the first of many MFA-P sessions. Hopefully we'll even have some live one day. But really thank you for coming and thanks for your interest in strategic charitable giving and philanthropy. Have a great day. Enjoy the sunshine, hopefully, if it shines where you are. If not, we'll hope the sun is shining soon. Have a great afternoon, everyone, or morning, wherever you happen to be. And thanks for taking an hour to be with us.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe and well.
Bye. Thanks for having us, Brad.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks, Brad.
All the best, guys. Brad, you want to keep us online for a sec?
I still think there's like 30 people here, Mike. Okay, I got to run. I've got a 1 o'clock. Mike, way to go. Nice to see you. You were amazing. Really, you spoke beautifully.
Yeah, all
Mike, really? You were great.
Thanks,
really.
Thanks, Mark. Same to you and Serena and Brad. Great job all around, I think.
Yeah, thanks. I really genuinely appreciate your participation today. It's this is going to be a slow grind and a slow battle, but it's an important fight.
Yeah.
Really,
Thanks so
really
much,
important.
Brad.
Is this something where we can get a copy of the video and something that we can post through our LinkedIn site so that
Yes,
more people in the community can see it after the fact?
Yeah, Barb, how would that work? I know we're going to be circulating. The recording is going to be available, but how can we ensure everybody gets a copy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've recorded this and I will upload it to YouTube and share that link with, it'll be unlisted and I'll share that link with Beth and then you'll be able to promote it yourselves.
Yeah, wonderful. If you guys can make a point of emailing it out to us, and even just how Serena kind of gave the 1, 2, 3 about how to post this kind of stuff, maybe remind us how we can get this on our LinkedIn, and then hopefully our LinkedIn communities will start to see it and pay attention as well.
Especially if we put up that discount 20% before June 30th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to run. Bye, everybody. Take
All the
care.
best,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Barb, for everything. Barb, thanks so much for facilitating and hosting this. I really appreciate that as well.
Thank you. Great job.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I still got a few minutes if there's more that you want to cover off, guys. But otherwise, yeah, I thought that was great. Thanks for having us, Brad.
Yeah. Thank you
No,
both.
I'm good. I think that was great. I just really appreciate it, Mike, a lot,
Yeah.
and Serena, a lot.
Of course. Thank you
great.
guys so much. It was a great conversation. It's awesome to like just to hear how different people approach it, but then there's so many similarities. It's interesting.
Yeah, but like, yeah, at the end of the day, you have to bring it up, right? Like that's what people are like. Yeah, I'm just waiting for my clients to talk about it. I'm like, yeah, they're not.
That's the biggest thing that the MFA-P stresses like a million times is you got to